Hi, it's Easter here in Poland, which means that it's the sort of time of year where people start to think a little bit about the next step in their teaching career, or in some cases their very first step. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the state of play here in Poland for EFL teachers, either those looking to come here to continue their career or those looking to start their career here in the country. With Closely Observed Teaching, I'm Christopher Walker. I moved to Poland in 2006 and I did my CELTA with International House Krakow, which has since then closed. I don't think it was my fault that it closed. I think I was a pretty decent teacher for the year that I worked there, but who knows, maybe it's my fault. In my first year as a teacher, I was paid cash. I earned 2,000 zloty per calendar month for my teaching, and that kind of covered any of the holidays and things like that. As well as Christmas and Easter holidays, Poland also has what they call the feria. I think they have the same sort of thing in other places in Europe as well. And this would be the winter break. Nowadays, when feria falls almost on top of Christmas, it can prove quite trying. Try to say the word, shall I? And I'll explain why by reference to Brexit. So no discussion of the teaching situation in Poland or the wider employment situation here is complete without at least some reference to Brexit. But a lot of what I'm going to say is more true now for teachers than when I started working here in Bielsko. See, I worked in Krakow for a year, then I took a break for a little while, went off to Spain to study. I wanted to see what it was like to be a language student rather than a language teacher. Learnt some pretty good lessons there. When I came back, I came to Bielsko thinking, small town experience might be useful. And what I didn't know was that the school I was coming to was quite deservedly famous in Poland as a sort of teacher development centre. They put a big emphasis on developing teachers in their careers. So the first point I want to make about Poland is that for any teacher, it's a great place to come if you find a good school like International House here in Bielsko, like International House in Torun, or in Bydgoszcz, or in Wrocław. These are all schools within the IH network that really stress the importance of continuous professional development. They don't take teachers on necessarily who are keen to be backpack teachers, the sort of teacher who wants to work for a year but also have a long holiday and the work is kind of there to pay their way. These are schools that will help you develop your career so that you could really see yourself as an EFL teacher rather than just somebody working in Poland on a long-term holiday. Of course, International House isn't the only place you can turn to for this sort of experience. I've started developing contacts with a company called English Wizards, and I've been impressed by what they offer as well. They stress the importance of professional development, and recently I gave a training session for them, which you'll be able to find somewhere online eventually. I was very impressed by the attitude of those teachers, and I think that's what you want as a teacher. You want to be part of a network of teachers who are keen to develop their skills, for whom the teaching of English is what they want to do rather than what they have to do to pay for this extended holiday. But let's come back to the finances a little bit. I mean, Poland is fantastic for the development of teachers, and I would say from what I've heard from other people, it ranks higher than a lot of the traditional TEFL hotspots because of that. You know, you're treated as a professional, and if you act like a professional, you will be rewarded for that with the commitment of your school and the loyalty that they can offer, as well as their development aspects. But what about the financial side? Well, here's where things stand for me at the moment, and this would be a model for people coming from Britain, for at least the UK, who want to go and teach here in Poland. So for the past maybe 7 or 8 years, I've not been operating as a teacher as such, but as a self-employed contractor. So I contract out my services. The school is my main client, and I work there for the majority of my time. And at the end of every calendar month, I produce an invoice for them. Producing an invoice means that I need an accountant. And at the moment, an accountant will cost you around 130 to 150 zloty per month to handle the paperwork and to calculate how much tax you need to pay. But I have my own business, and it's necessary, I think, for all teachers coming from the UK now to do the same. I think that that's going to be the way that things will work moving forwards. Because of Brexit, we no longer have freedom of movement, so UK nationals coming to Poland will be treated roughly on a par with their American colleagues or their Australian colleagues. And the way that's worked, from what I can see and from what I've heard from my colleagues at the school who come from those places, so on arrival you register, but you also need the work visa and you need to open a company, and once you've got the company you will then need to start paying your ZUS contributions as well as tax. So what are ZUS contributions? ZUS is basically the Polish welfare state, so that would be health, employment protection, not that you really get any because you pay a fiddly little amount for that, and notional idea of a pension at the end of the day. And at the moment, if you open a company here, you're going to be looking at ZUS payments of something in the region of 1,300 zloty per calendar month. One of the good things about having your own company is that ZUS payment can then be offset against your tax liability, and the tax, if I remember correctly, comes in at about 18%. So on a good month you might find yourself paying a couple of hundred zloty. On a very good month you might find yourself paying just short of 1,000 zloty for tax, after the ZUS has been paid, of course. And if you were to buy any new equipment like a laptop, then of course you could send the receipt for the laptop, the VAT receipt, to your accountant, and they would then be able to offset some of the tax that way. So that's, I suppose, one thing to consider about the fact that you have your own company. The other thing, of course, is that as you become more embedded in the country and you start to reach out with contacts, certain avenues open that are only really open to those of us who can produce invoices. So if your employment contract were entirely with the school, for example, then you might find it tricky, for instance, to do proofreading jobs for local universities. They like paper trail, they like invoices. So the fact that I'm able to produce invoices for anybody who wants one for the work that I do, that's a good thing for me, because it increases the avenues through which I can work. However, there is a big downside, and I mentioned this earlier with this idea of feria, and that's that when you become a self-employed contractor, you only get paid for the time that you spend in the classroom. So school holidays, even sick days, you'll get paid nothing. And this has happened to me a few times where, oh yes, and with the ZUS payments, they are a base rate payment. They are flat. They don't go according to how much you earn, they go by the month. So I had a month, tail end of I think it was like August or September last year maybe, where I'd taken a bit of time off because I was exhausted from the online teaching of the first lockdown. So I didn't work very much during the summer. And when I filed my first invoices for August, I didn't actually get as much money coming in as I was sending out through Zeus. So that gives you an idea of what it can be like. And with the Ferrier this year coinciding with the winter break, with the Christmas break, where we had Christmas break, and then to extend the lockdown and hope that the numbers lowered so that the schools could be reopened, the government decided to make the winter break then go straight after the Christmas break. So that meant that from something like the 22nd of December up until about the 17th of January, I was effectively unemployed. And as somebody who has a family to support, that was a bit challenging. But I'm used to that sort of thing, and if you plan correctly, if you look ahead and see where there will be moments of shortfall, then you can manage your finances and you can put a bit of money to one side. If it looks like you're flush in your bank account at the end of one month, well, have a look at the next month. Are you going to be working every day of every week then? And if not, well, make sure to save some of the money before you spend all of it on, I don't know, a DJI Pocket 2 like I did. So that's the Zeus side, the tax side, and the self-employed side. What about the accommodation side? Well, when I first came to Poland and I worked in Krakow, the accommodation was bundled in. And at that time it was a property that was owned by somebody connected with the school. So I guess they had a special rate. So although I was only being paid 2,000 zloty a month, that included my accommodation and all the bills for it. I don't think I would have had such a juicy deal in Krakow if I'd started in 2016 compared to 2006. And that's putting it mildly. In the bigger cities, rent will be high. You could be looking at 2,000 zloty or more per month, which can be quite a lot, especially since there will be bills to go on top of that. You might also find that it's quite difficult to source a landlord. When I came to Bielsko, that was very easy to do because the landlord was the, I think, sister-in-law of the owner of the school where I worked, and they had some property, so there was no problem. It's like, oh yes, rent it out to the teachers, that'll be fine. But in recent years, the trend has been more towards private landlords and private accommodation. And this is where the problems start to emerge, because you see, when you are a landlord and you advertise your apartment through the local estate agents, the nieruchomości, the fees are quite high, and there's a big difference for landlords between renting accommodation to Polish citizens who might be there for 5 or 6 years at a go, and renting to EFL teachers who may well be only present for 9 months of the year. You know, the school term starts in October and the school term finishes in June. So if you don't hang around for the summer school and you only want the accommodation for the time that you're in situ, you might find it quite difficult to get hold of a landlord, and certainly not one that charges a premium. So I have met a number of people who struggled that way. They took accommodation that was subprime, let's say. They weren't terribly happy with the conditions, and then they ended up having to move and find the money for the deposit on a second place. So forward planning there, I would say, is key. So what else is there to consider? Well, in terms of pay structures, I would say that if you can get here and if you get yourself established and prove your worth, then the pay can be quite rewarding. I live a comfortable life here. I can eat out anytime I want, when the restaurants are open, that is. And if I need something, I can generally find the money to go out and get it. There have been times when I've found it a bit of a struggle, and it's nice sometimes to find a bit of summer school work in a different country with a different exchange rate that can kind of prop me up a little bit. But otherwise I have no complaints, and I haven't found many teachers who do have complaints. The money is good for here, but it doesn't travel. Such has been the rate of inflation in the country over recent years that if you want to get a good coffee, you'd pay just as much here as you would do at any cafe in England. The beer, thankfully, is still relatively cheap. You're still not expected to pay much more than about 10 zloty for a pint, so that's about £2. I don't think I could find anywhere selling beer on tap for that sort of price. And food is generally well priced, but it is inching up towards the sort of prices that you would pay in a Western restaurant. I bought takeaway pizza recently, and I think it was about 35 zloty for a large pizza, so that would be about £7 or so. And I think that might be close to the going rate back home. So the prices are going up, and I think that they're going up faster than we can expect teacher salaries to go up. And there is a limit to what a teacher can earn, or what a teacher can charge for an hour. At a certain stage, the student will start to wonder, am I really going to learn that much English in the next hour to warrant this sort of expenditure? So don't come to the country expecting to leave loaded. You'll earn enough to live comfortably. You'll be able to get around the country and see the sights. There are some great cities here. But I wouldn't expect to be taking money home in a bag like you might have done in the past if you worked for a year in Japan or South Korea. I think those days have gone as well, from what people have been telling me. I think the whole EFL market has matured somewhat, and I think part of that might be because of the growth in online teaching. When you can pay a teacher anywhere in the world to teach you instead of having to go local, you sometimes find that the numbers come down. So, is it a bleak picture that I'm painting of teaching life in Poland post-Brexit? No, I don't think so. I think the opportunities are still there, and I think that if you are a teacher who is committed to EFL, Poland is one of the best places in the world to come. It's a great place to build your skills, to develop. The students themselves are generally very good. I mean, teenagers are teenagers everywhere, but if you get slightly more advanced teenagers or slightly older teenagers, you often find that they already have a very good level of English, and you're able to help them develop even further in terms of sophistication, for example. So there are a lot of really good things about the job here itself. The teaching culture is generally good. The work, well, you're expected to work. If you are self-employed, you do get a little bit of flexibility in what you accept and what you don't, but you might find yourself working long hours, split shifts, for example, during the day, starting early and finishing late. But I think that's the case in most countries now in EFL. You know, the days of the backpack teacher, I think, are coming to an end, as well they should. We owe our students more than that. Well, for non-native speaker teachers, I think that the picture's even rosier than ever. For one thing, there has been a general movement in the industry in the last few years to become more accepting of people as teachers, regardless of their origin. Some of the best teachers I've worked alongside in the last few years have been non-native speaker teachers. Their English is just as proficient as anyone else's, and sometimes even more so, because they have a deeper understanding of the grammar involved in English, and that's something that a lot of native speaker teachers lack, certainly at the start. And right now, thanks to Brexit, we've got the situation where you have all of these schools that were already established and who already have certain expectations for the number of teachers that they want to employ. Those teaching positions are going to need to be filled. And if there aren't so many native speaker teachers coming across from the UK to take those positions, it leaves a void, and that void has to be filled. And this is the great chance for non-native speaker teachers from Poland and other places in the EU to come in and prove their worth. There is still going to be some resistance on the part of parents and students who, for a long time, here and elsewhere, have considered native speaker to equal better teacher. But I think that that's starting to shift. There's been a lot going on in terms of kind of pushing the idea that it's about the teacher, not the language proficiency so much. So I think that this is a good thing for non-native speaker teachers. And since my interest has always been in encouraging the best teachers to come here, certainly, I'm happy about that, because I want to work alongside the best. So there you go. In this video I've talked about quite a lot. It's been a longer video than I expected it to be, but those who know me will not be that surprised. I do like a good waffle. Although I don't know how to make them, I make pancakes. If you've got any questions about what it's like working as an English teacher here, and I haven't answered them in the video somehow, if I've missed it, which is almost inevitable really, isn't it? Then leave a comment below or get in touch. You can find me on Facebook as well, under Closely Observed English. But for today, that's all I've got to say about teaching prospects and the teaching situation here in Poland. If you decide to go for it, do it. It's a great country, great people, great cities, and most importantly, great cafes. So until next time, thank you. Goodbye.